You all please join me in Gasho as I read the words of our founder, Master Shinran Shonin. It is difficult to meet true teachers and difficult for them to instruct. It is difficult to hear the teaching well and more difficult still to accept it. More difficult even than trust in the teachings of Shakyamuni's lifetime is the true entrusting of the universal vow. The sutra teaches that it is the most difficult of all difficulties, that nothing surpasses this difficulty. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nammandats, nammandats, nammandats. Good morning, everyone. Wow, what an interesting weather we're having today. You know, yesterday I was very privileged and so fortunate to go to Seattle Betsuin's Obon festival, and I gotta say, it was quite hot. Not as hot as it could be, of course, so it could always be worse, but it was in the high 80s that day for sure. Today, it'll be a little bit lower, but I just got an alert on my phone that said rain is possible in the next couple of hours, so what an interesting weather we're having with us today. It is Obon season. And for those of you who are new to the temple or haven't participated in Obon before, it is probably one of the most fun times that all the temples experience each year. Most temples during this season have a Japanese festival that goes on where they sell Japanese food, lots of teriyaki chicken, other Japanese goods, and have a whole host of other fun activities. Most importantly, the dancing that occurs in a huge circle in front of the temple or on the temple grounds. This is a time when we look back and we reflect on all of our loved ones who have gone before us to the Pure Land or who have passed away. This is to remind us that their teachings, that their guidance, and their effect on all of us still is strongly with us to this day. And it doesn't have to be just family members or people who are just closely related to you. It can be also people who had a very large impression on your life, very much like teachers do. And when you think about it in terms of Buddhism, it is I think it is also one of the religions that honors the position or the responsibility of teachers as well. And as I said from the opening quote today, that Master Shinran said, it is difficult to meet true teachers and difficult for them to instruct. It is difficult to hear the teaching well and more difficult to accept it. One of the things that Shinran talks highly about in these opening quotes is our great sense of ego. We go sometimes into high school or into college or even into other seminars thinking we truly know what we don't already know. We truly think that we have sometimes the best idea of how things go, and I am guilty of this as well. Sometimes when I go to an Aikido seminar, I see something that, I go, really? Like that works? Or really, that I don't agree with that, or, and gosh, it's even worse between ministers, I think, sometimes, like, the big egos come out then. And I think letting our ego go, or letting go of the ego, becomes one of the most difficult tasks in all Buddhist teachings and in all Buddhist practices. When, Zazen, when they sit in Zazen meditation, people often don't realize that when you sit in Zazen meditation, you're sitting with yourself. And for some folks, that can be quite a daunting task. There's no one around, or there's nothing there to distract you, and there's nothing there to keep you from having to address the internal chaos that can be your mind sometimes. In terms of Jodo Shinshu, right? When we say the Nembutsu, are we really letting go of our ego and truly accepting the wisdom and compassion that is Amida Buddha, the sincere practice that leads us to the Pure Land? Letting go of our ego is so very difficult. I have trouble with it. Everybody has trouble with it. And this is why we get into debates and to arguments, and sometimes bad feelings arise. I mean, going on a global scale, probably wars have broken out because of a person's ego was not able to be extinguished or able to be, put aside. But the Buddha's teaching still teaches us truth, regardless of where we are in life. One of the things that I think that is the most skillful teaching of Buddhism is the approach to our views of death. Yes, it is very true. Obon is a season where we must reflect on the ones who we loved who have passed away, reflecting on our own mortality for that matter. And yet at the same time, this is not an occasion of morose and sadness and tears. Sometimes it can be. But when you think about the way that we come here to celebrate, we're all dancing with joy, and we are dancing together with each other. I think these Obon dances, while they can be quite complicated, aren't so complicated that eventually we can start following and moving in unison with each other. Because while there is an inevitability to life that of course all religions teach, there is also a unity in our interdependence with one another as well. There is this truth that we do not have to face this reality alone. One of the many common stories I have seen, and that really highlights this, is of course the story of the story of the mustard seed. Have any of you heard this story before? So for those of you who haven't heard this story, there was a woman in India named Kisa Gotami, and she had suffered something that no person should have to suffer, but she lost her child to death, her son, her young son. Ideally speaking, no parent should outlive their child, and yet this was a reality that Kisa Gotami had to face. So she went to the Buddha. She went to Shakyamuni Buddha. She says, the Buddha is here. He can help me. He can fix this problem. So she went to the Buddha and implored to him, make my son live again. Bring him back to me. Now the Buddha, being an enlightened person, realized that telling her that this is just a part of life or that this is a reality would not only be ineffective, but also be cold and heartless. She had just suffered the death of her son. And in this time, he knew that no matter what truth that he told her from his lips, she would not be able to accept it. As is stated in the opening poem by Shinran, one of the most difficult of all difficulties is, to accept the Buddha's words sometimes. So the Buddha performed something that's called hoben, or skillful means. And this particular act was one where the Buddha asked her, I need you to go find a mustard seed, okay? Take a mustard seed. And what you need to do is you need to go around to the towns and you need to find a home that has not experienced death. And then if you are able to bring back that mustard seed from that home that has not experienced such a thing, then your son can come alive again. So she immediately rushes to the first home and asks them, do you have a mustard seed? And they said, we do. And then she followed with the second question. Did someone pass away in this house? Oh, yes, we lost our grandfather not too long ago. Okay, I can't use this mustard seed. So she went to the next one. Do you have a mustard seed? Yes, we do. Has someone suffered death in this house? Yes, our great-grandmother passed away. From house to house to house, Kisa Gotami went. But in this realization, she didn't actually come to despair and come into a huge sense of sorrow, as we might think that she would. She began to slowly realize that she was not suffering alone. she began to realize that all beings present also go through the same type of suffering. In this way, we see the skillful teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha did not deliver a message of cold, hard facts to Kisagotami. The Buddha did not deliver a hopeless message of nihilism. And in fact, he set Kisagotami on a path to meet with her community and to have them support her in this time of desperate need. It is true that she, did not, in a sense, get the ultimate wish, or her wish of being, getting her son back from death. But at the same time, she came to a very heartfelt realization that she was not alone in her suffering and that she was also supported by a loving community. In many ways, I think Obon reflects this story because people of all walks of life come out and dance with each other, celebrate with each other, drink and eat together, laugh together, and remember their loved ones together. This is done during a time of great joy. And this doesn't mean that I encourage us to stifle our negative emotions or our sad emotions. When we think of a loved one who has passed away, who we love very, very much, we sometimes can't help but cry. We sometimes can't help but feel a great sense of loss and a great sense of sadness. Buddhism, contrary to what people may believe, does not tell us to stifle these emotions and to cut them off and to become cold, hard rocks that just let life pass them by. In fact, we highly encourage to acknowledge these healthy emotions of sadness and feelings of loss. And it is true that sometimes these emotions and these sadnesses come from a sense of ego, come from a sense of self. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad. That doesn't necessarily mean that there are these horrible things that hinder our enlightenment. It is true that all of us have attachments of some kind. And yet at the same time, we're able to participate in wonderful events like Obon and celebrate with loved ones and laugh and share with wonderful times and dancing. And at the same time, we can reflect and remember in happiness the people who have gone before us. So, as we enter further into this Obon season, try to go to as many Obon festivals as you can, dance your hearts away, eat good food, share in the community that is the Buddhist temples here in the Northwest, see friends that you haven't seen in a long time, laugh and dance. Feelings of sadness is okay too, tears are fine, but realize that we are all here in this community coming together to reflect on the ultimate reality that is impermanence in this life. And realize too that this type of impermanence doesn't have to be a negative thing. The Buddha taught us that it doesn't have to be a negative thing. This, of course, is not a morbid talk telling us we should be happy about death and feel like, joy at its arrival. But it also instructs us that we don't have to close ourselves off and be alone and suffer alone during these times as well. In this time of great dancing and great joy, I am eager to get back out there and dance and remember my grandparents, my great-grandparents, all my aunties and uncles who have gone to the Pure Land before me, and realizing that they are still with me in the recitation of Namo Amida Butsu. So if you would all please join me in Gassho as I close my message with the readings of Master Shinran Shonin's Wasan. It is difficult to meet true teachers and difficult for them to instruct. It is difficult to hear the teaching well, and more difficult still to accept it. More difficult even than trust in teachings of Shakyamuni in Shakyamuni's lifetime, it is the true entrusting of the universal vow. The sutra teaches that it is the most difficult of all difficulties. that nothing surpasses this difficulty. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Nam mandats, nam mandats, nam mandats.